In the far reaches of Texas, beneath a moonless sky, the wind whispered through the weathered beams of a small wooden cabin, carrying with it the scent of dry earth and distant rain. Inside, James lay asleep on a creaky bed, a battered oil lamp casting faint amber light across his face. James was a man of quiet resolve, his skin bronzed by the sun, his hands calloused from years of tending his land. Each morning, before dawn, he would rise, pull on his frayed shirt, and step into the cool morning air to feed the livestock and water the crops, a life steady and predictable. But that night, everything changed. He awoke without knowing why. His heart thudded in his chest, a strange pull urging him outside. He stepped into the dark, and his breath caught. The earth, once green with life, was cracked and lifeless. The animals gone, the crops vanished. James sank to his knees, running his fingers through the cold, dry soil, his mind struggling to understand. And that's when he saw it, a glimmer in the dirt. He brushed the soil away and uncovered a small black pendant, half buried like a forgotten relic. It was cold to the touch. Without thinking much of it, he slipped it into his pocket and returned to salvage what little remained. That night, lying in bed, he gave the pendant a passing glance before setting it on the table and closing his eyes. Hours later, he stirred, a mundane need to visit the bathroom. But when he stepped back into the main room, he froze. A brilliant white light spilled across the cabin walls, not from the moon, not from any lamp, but from the pendant. He reached for it slowly, and the moment his fingers touched the surface, the world around him began to dissolve. The wooden floor beneath his feet melted into nothingness. The cabin walls broke apart into fragments of light, and a soft, otherworldly hum filled the air. Then silence. James opened his eyes and found himself standing in the middle of a street unlike any he had ever seen. Towering skyscrapers gleamed like silver spears against the sky. Sleek cars hovered above the ground, gliding silently through the air. Humanoid robots strolled the sidewalks beside people dressed in clothes that shimmered like liquid light. The air was alive, buzzing with strange energy. Drawn forward, James wandered the streets in awe until he stumbled upon something impossibly familiar, his farm. But it was no longer the dry, lifeless patch he had left behind. It was a lush paradise, overflowing with crops of every kind, their leaves shining as though dusted with gold. With renewed purpose, he harvested everything he could carry and followed the sounds of a bustling marketplace. There, traders shouted prices in a dozen languages, and the people's eyes widened at his produce. In minutes, it was sold, and his pockets were heavier than they had ever been. Curiosity pushed him further. He stepped into a sleek electronics store where glowing displays lined the walls. On impulse, he purchased a cutting-edge smartphone, its glassy surface smooth and cold in his palm. That night, in an abandoned house he had claimed as his own, he explored the internet. One video caught his attention, a discussion about something called cryptocurrency. The narrator spoke of vast fortunes, of wealth made overnight. Bitcoin, they called it. Expensive, yes, but powerful. The next day, James harvested again, sold his goods, and returned with enough to buy Bitcoin. He waited. Days passed. Nothing changed. Disappointed, he returned to farming, convinced it had been a fool's gamble. Weeks later, out of idle boredom, he opened his account and froze. His balance had multiplied beyond comprehension. What he had bought for a modest sum was now worth a fortune. Overwhelmed with joy, James spent the night wandering the glowing streets, buying anything that caught his eye. Clothes of woven light, mechanical tools that worked without touch, foods that tasted like pure memory. In time, he bought one of the most beautiful homes in the city. He began a life of comfort, joy, and discovery. And then, he met her. She was unlike anyone he had ever seen, radiant with a depth that frightened him. In a gesture of absolute trust, he transferred all his wealth into her name. The night after, he awoke in their shared bed, and reached for her. But the sheets were cold, the house was empty, and the pendant was gone.